Welcome to Tipping Point. I'm Lee Cummings, guest hosting for Jimmy Evans today. A few weeks ago, Jimmy had me on this program to interview me about my book that I just recently wrote called Take Heed, Watch and Pray, Overcoming Deception in the Last Days. And for those of you who have not heard that episode, I'd encourage you to maybe go back and take a listen to that. Also, if you'd like to have the book, you can find it on Amazon, or you can also go to leecummings.com where we have all of our resources. I'm very honored today to guest host for my mentor and my friend, Jimmy Evans. And today, on this episode, we're going to be talking about Gog and Magog and the rising storm on the northern border of Israel. In this episode, I really want to bring focus into what is right now emerging on the northern border of Israel, even in the midst of the current war in Gaza that has all of the attention, all the news media, and really all of the eyes of the world are centered on the IDF's battle that's taking place in Gaza against Hamas. But all the time that has been going on, there's this concern in the north with Hezbollah in Lebanon and the rising reality that war is probably imminent up there. Recently, I was talking to a friend of mine, a contact that's part of the intelligence apparatus in Israel, and he said, keep your eyes on the north. What most people don't know, because they haven't been paying attention to the north as much as we have been in Gaza, is that Hezbollah has been raining down missiles from the north the entire time since October 7th. There has been little skirmishes. There's been a lot of social media propaganda that's been put out about a potential October 7th-like attack that Hezbollah is planning and ready to unleash on the northern part of Israel. About 20,000 acres of land were just recently burned in the north by Hezbollah and by these groups in the north. And it's become very, very apparent that even though the war may feel like it's grinding to a halt in Gaza, as if that part of the battle is almost done, it's really just ticking up in the north. And Hamas, let me tell you, Hamas is a powerful terrorist organization, but nothing compared to Hezbollah in the north. Hezbollah is similar to Hamas in many different ways, but they're also vastly different. Hamas is Sunni, and Hezbollah is Shia, which is also funded by the Iranian regime. They are a proxy in the north, as well as the Houthis in Yemen. And they're a much larger entity with a huge arsenal of weapons and a massive threat to Israel from the north. So Israel is very, very concerned about this thing turning into a massive regional war. One of the things that also unites Hamas and Hezbollah, even though that they have different ideologies, it's kind of like in some ways like Catholic and Protestants. You've got Sunni and Shia. The one thing that though does bring them together is their united hatred for the nation of Israel and specifically the Jewish people. This is a satanic ancient hatred. They hate the Jewish people. Both of these organizations are religiously committed to the destruction of Israel. And while you have the UN and you've got several other organizations and nations around the world that are calling for a ceasefire, neither one of these two organizations want a ceasefire, because neither one of these two organizations want a two-state solution. They have a final solution, not a two-state solution. And their final solution includes wiping out every Jew off the face of the earth, removing what they call the Zionist entity and establishing Islam's dominance in the land that is Israel, in both Judea, Samaria, and all of that entire area. And they're not going to stop until they do that, because they are demonically fueled. This is not a political thing. Their politics are informed by their religious convictions and their religious beliefs. It's not the other way around. And so you've got Western democracies who are working really hard to try to get a ceasefire, but there is no ceasefire to have, and Israel's caught in between. So what is going on? Recently in the Jerusalem Post, June 16th, there was an article that was run that says, is the Israel-Hamas war the war of Gog and Magog. And it was a really interesting article. In it, it says, many Jewish rabbis have been discussing this issue since October the 7th. Rabbi Yosef Rimon, an influential Jewish educator and scholar known for his profound insights into Jewish law and eschatology, has provided a detailed interpretation of the recent conflict through the lens of the Gog and Magog prophecy. That's the Ezekiel 38 prophecy. Ramon noted that the recent escalation coincided with the Jewish holidays, particularly Sukkot, and that it's significant. He pointed out that traditionally, the war of Gog and Magog is expected to begin around this time. He explained in October, the future redemption, which began to sparkle in the north of Nisan, will be completed in the month of Tishri on Hoshana Rabbah during the war of Gog and Magog. I think that's really interesting. So what it tells us is that in the land of Israel, we have rabbis who are taking a look at what took place on October the 7th and the war that has resulted and is increasing. If we think it's going away, make no mistake about it, this war is going to have several different rises and falls, but it's leading somewhere. And now the rabbis in Israel are recognizing it. They're looking at this through the lens of biblical prophecy and saying, could this be the war that Ezekiel prophesied of Gog and Magog? One thing you may not know, or maybe you do, it's that Christianity has an eschatological viewpoint about what's going to take place at the end of the age, but Islam also has an eschatology that is fueling and is driving a lot of their ideology and a lot of their actions. They have their own eschatology. It runs parallel, and in some ways, in a very eerie way, it intersects with biblical eschatology. So when we hear that the rabbis are taking a look at this through the lens of eschatology, and you and I today, even from the West, are looking at the events that have been taking place in the Middle East, where these birth pangs and these events, these signs that are being fulfilled right before our eyes, we see it through the lens of eschatology. It's important to know that Muslims, and specifically jihadi Muslims that are very fervent about the land in the Middle East, that they're also looking at this through an eschatological lens, just not a biblical one. But for a moment, let's think about what these rabbis in Israel are looking at. They're considering, is this the beginning of the Ezekiel 38 war of Gog and Magog? Well, let's take a look at it, because I think this is interesting. It's going to tie in with what's taking place in the north. In Ezekiel 38, in verse 15, we're going to read a whole bunch of this here in a minute, but in verse 15, God is speaking to Gog, and he says, you will come from your place out of the remote parts of the north, you and many people with you, all of them riding on horses, a great assembly and a mighty army. So we know that the north is significant. It's going to be the entry into the beautiful land, or into the holy land, of this character named Gog and the armies of Magog and his confederation. But beginning in verse number 2 of Ezekiel 38, it says, Son of man, set your face towards Gog of the land of Magog, the prince of Rosh, Meshech, and Tubal, and prophesy against him. And say, Thus says the Lord God, Behold, I am against you, O Gog, prince of Rosh, Meshech, and Tubal. I will turn you about and put hooks in your jaw, and I will bring you out and all of your armies, horses and horsemen, all of them splendidly attired, a great company with buckler and shield, all of them wielding swords, Persia, Ethiopia, and Put with them, all of them with shield and helmet, Gomer with all of its troops, Bet Togarmah from the remotest parts of the north with all of its troops, and many people with you. And then verse 8 it says, After many days you will be summoned, and in the latter years you will come into the land, and the land that is restored from the sword, whose inhabitants have been gathered from many nations to the mountains of Israel, which had been a continual waste, but its people were brought out from the nations, and they are living securely, all of them. Well, there's absolutely no doubt that this prophecy is speaking about the latter times. This isn't something that was fulfilled in Israel's ancient history that's already done. This is something that's coming. And even the rabbis in Israel are recognizing that. Now, there's some dispute among end times teachers about the timing of the war of Gog and Magog. Some people put it at the beginning of the tribulation. Other people put it at the middle of the tribulation. And some people look at it as being one and the same with the Battle of Armageddon. And even some of the characters that are included, whether Russia's involved in this or as these nations that are listed, it's interesting because Gog, Magog, and Tubal all are ancient lands that are very clearly identified with the land of modern Asia Minor or Turkey. And then when we look at Persia, that's definitely Iran. So we can see that Iran has a part to play in the future prophetic battle of Gog and Magog, as well as Ethiopia, parts of Ethiopia that were Sudan and Libya. These are all part of this confederation with this Gog of Magog. So there's some speculation of whether Russia is going to be leading the charge on that. Even if they are, it's going to be a confederation of nations that we see listed here in Ezekiel 38 that are going to come from the north, as it says in verse 15. They're going to come down into the land after Israel has been restored from all the different nations, even when the land was left desolate. And this Gog and his confederation are going to come into the land from the north. And all of these nations are going to be with it, including Iran. Well, if you take a look at all of these nations, the one thing that they have in common is that they are all currently Islamic nations. I think that's important for us to recognize because sometimes you and I can read the Bible as Americans and we can import America into the text. I think America has a place in Bible prophecy, but it's peripheral. It really is Bible prophecy, and the Bible is a Israel, Jerusalem-centric book. And most of the prophecies that deal with the end of the age are focused on the land of Israel and the nations that surround it. Well, today there's over 22 different Islamic or Arab nations around Israel. So when you begin to think about the nations that are surrounding Israel, they're all Islamic. And so it makes sense that if they're coming down from the north, that these are going to be an Islamic confederation under the auspices of Gog, who's the chief prince of Rosh, or Rosh means head. However the translators translate that, however you come out on that, here's what we know is that this figure is going to come, and when he comes in, he's going to come from the north, and it's going to be an Islamic confederacy. I believe in many ways it's going to be fueled by the same spirit that infueled Haman in the book of Esther, and that Daniel talks about, the prince of Persia, and even to this day, since 1979, the Islamic Revolution in the nation of Iran, they have been dead set on the destruction of Israel. They've been shooting bombs, missiles. We saw an attack like we've never seen directly from Iran into Israel in the last couple of months. My friend, this is an escalation of the spirit of the prince of Persia that is hell-bent on the destruction of the Jewish people. It's a forerunner of the Antichrist spirit, and its proxies, and Hezbollah and Hamas are very much committed to this reality. It's a satanic fervor. Make no mistake about it. This is spiritual, and it's not going to subside. It's only going to intensify and accelerate, not only in the Middle East, but around the world. We're seeing Islam and its influence on major universities in America, on the protests that are taking place on Columbia University, Harvard. We're seeing Western nations and Western cities like London and Hamburg and Berlin, as well as Madrid and other places, have these major protests and these huge gatherings of pro-Hamas protesters.
This September 20th and 21st, we invite you to join us at Fellowship Church in Grapevine, Texas for the Tipping Point Prophecy Conference. As we approach Rosh Hashanah, thousands of believers will come together to worship, understand world events through the lens of Bible prophecy, and anticipate the imminent return of Jesus Christ. Secure your place today at conference.endtimes.com. For those unable to attend in person, live streaming is available. Endtimes.com subscribers receive a 50% discount. Join us with your church group or friends for a weekend of profound spiritual impact and fellowship. Prepare for the Lord's return at the Tipping Point Prophecy Conference. Witness prophecy unfold.